Thanks.
Hi, I am Meg Westcott. I work in residence life. I work in quarantine and isolation for COVID. I chose to sign up for this workshop to actually learn, become better educated. And also as a white woman, I am looking to see what I can do. Um, that's pretty much it.
Thanks, Meg. I really appreciate you being here.
You're welcome.
Who else?
Hi, I'm Patrice. Um, what can I say? I'm doing this program because I'm trying to get my lead certification, and this is one of the things that I was interested in attending in order to do that.
Hi, I'm Melvina. I took this because it's also a part of the same program as Patrice just stated. But I also want to learn more about what, white privileges and other information that I don't know as of right now.
All right, awesome. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Patricia and Melvina. Who else?
Hi, I'm Giselle, and I also have the same reasons as they do, but also because I feel like I don't know enough about white privilege. And especially with everything going on nowadays, I really want to learn more and learn how I can help and be better.
Awesome. Let's do two more. Who else is here?
Hi, my name is Kauthar, but I go by Kay. I'm a corporate comm major and global and international studies minor. And I have the same reason as Giselle. Like, I want to learn more about like white privilege, and because it's like I'm going to be working in a corporate environment, and I want to be able to like understand like different like cultures and different and diversity within like the firm that I'll be working in, hopefully, and just get a better understanding of what white privilege really is.
Awesome. Thanks, Kay. So great to see you here. All right, one more. So who are you and why you're here? That's the question for those of you that are just joining us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. Okay. So my name is Devin, and I'm here for a couple of the reasons that were said already, but I'm also here because I'm in sociology as well, and I don't know, I like learning about white privilege and it's not good, but I like learning more about it to educate myself and like with like racism and just to get more educated.
Devin, that is good because a lot of people don't like to talk about like these things. So no matter why you're here, I'm super excited that you're here. And so like with all of our presentations, it is only an hour, right? And trying to make it like as interactive as possible is really important to remember that that's the piece. So it's really just a starting out point. So it's not the end all be all. I really like to give that as a disclaimer. It's really just to hopefully probe you with some new nuggets, as I call them, for you all just to think about things that maybe you haven't thought about before. And so with only an hour's time, as you can imagine, it's not a lot of time. So super excited to share space. So let me share my screen. And make sure you can see it. Can you see a full screen presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. For my folks that I can see your face, thank you. I appreciate y'all. It's good to see so many of my staff members here as well. That's good. Awesome. So we're going to jump right in. Everybody see the next slide? Yes. Okay. So a little bit about me, because I definitely see some new faces of people that I don't know. So I always like to reintroduce myself. So for a lot of people don't even know that I even work here. Sometimes people think I'm a student, which is not bad either. But my name is Anissa Smith. I'm the director of our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I've been talking about privilege for quite some time now. I've been in higher education for 15 years, but specifically for the last about 7 years, I really committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion topics, and using my ability to be able to talk to people and kind of travel the world and speak. And privilege is one of those foundational platforms that I like to take with me everywhere I go. As a Black woman who's also queer and or gay, married, as a mom, you know, and just someone who has a lot of different experiences of my own personally, and then those of students. I've worked at 5 institutions, all of which have been predominantly white institutions. So I have been firsthand experienced to what white privilege looks like every single day. And I just really love to have these conversations. And so I'm all in, I'm committed. I just like for you all to know who I am and where I come from. And today is not just about me talking to you all, just advance notice. So you're going to have to give me some feedback. So my presentation style is that I like response, a call and response. So if I ask a question, I want to hear from you all. We definitely are going to utilize our chat. Harsh, I will ask you to help me out with the chat in case I missed something, please. Please utilize the chat just to show me you're here, that you're engaged in the topic, as well as things that kind of stand out for you. So like, let's just jump right in. So I like to kind of show people a little bit of what I plan to talk about. The reality is what usually happens is I don't get to it all, but my hope is that we can touch on 2 things that I feel like lead to white privilege, and that's racism and unconscious bias. I want to talk about those 2. I also want to briefly just talk about what white privilege is not, as well as some examples of it every single day, because I think a lot of times I've had conversations specifically with students and they can't give me examples of how they benefit from white privilege, right? And so really thinking about that. And then how to have effective conversations. Raise your hand or give me a reaction. Have you all had conversations about race with people of the opposite race? Yes. Have they gone good or bad? Okay, good. I see some people doing it. Okay, good. So we're going to talk about that. Those are the things I want to talk about because it's an important key piece that goes about having effective conversations about racism in general. But white privilege is not racism. It's 2 separate things. And that's what we're here to make sure that we all know the difference. And then hopefully you have some powerful takeaways. Just by looking at our group, I feel like we are majority people of color. So this conversation looks a little bit different for us, right? But it is very important to denote that like we also have a role in, of course, you know, things like how we, you know, confront it, you know, how we experience microaggressions, and just how we really understand it. Because I know as a person of color, I'm still learning a lot about racism in general and systematic racism, like how we got here. And so it's not something they taught us in history, right? So I think I can speak for myself and say that I'm still learning a lot. So I think that the conversation will be taken however you compartmentalize like what this all means for you. But please definitely jump in, like let's ask questions. All right, so before I jump to I took all of the animations off because the animations sometimes make me dizzy. So let's just jump in. My first question to you all is, what is the difference between racism and white privilege? So you can drop it in the chat or just unmute and talk to me, because those are easily confused. So are we talking about racism or what when we say white privilege?
So I'm not sure if this is correct, but just like a thought, racism is obviously just like I don't want to say hatred, but dislike for Black people or like other like minorities, and just like being different with them because they are different than white people. But I'd say white privilege is opportunities that come with being white that is not common for other people because of like life experiences and stuff like that. Right.
Awesome. Great job, Devin. Hold on. Sorry. I'm kind of moving my chat over just so I can see it. I see it's a lot happening in there. So, go ahead, Harsh. Give me a recap.
Raymond wrote, white privilege is when there's an advantage for Caucasians over other minorities due to their systematic roots.
Mhm.
And then Giselle wrote white privilege exists because of the enduring racism that's been prevalent throughout history.
Awesome. I'm just catching up. Hi to all of you who said hi to me in the chat. I never saw that, just so y'all know. Yeah, so exactly. I think you're all on the right page. So how about when we think about racism and bias? Because those two also, how are they connected? Are they connected when we talk about racism and bias? Anyone? So what is bias? Unconscious bias. Just take a stab at it. There's no right or wrong answer. We're just having a conversation, just throwing things out, and then I'll make sure I give you the factual notes. But what is unconscious bias?
Is it like being more favorable to one group than another?
Yes, looks like someone wrote tendency to lean towards one viewpoint, right? So is that conscious or unconscious notion of what you think about an individual or their group based on their identity, right? And so is bias and racism the same thing? Right, not. Bias leads to racism because bias is your thoughts and racism is how you act those thoughts out. Y'all hear me? Someone give me an example. Let's talk about real life. Real life. You may have this thought about a group of people and how do you act differently because of that thought? Someone give me an example. We see it every day.
I know personally when I used to go to country clubs for like my friends' bar mitzvahs and everything, I was usually the only person in there that looked like me. So I knew just be on my best behavior and not, give into that stereotype people may have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that stereotype could go a lot of different ways. For me as a Black woman, I think people assume that I'm going to be aggressive or angry or loud. And sometimes I can see in the way they are reserved or the way they treat me, anticipating how they think I'm going to act, right? And so on the screen, it's a lot of words, but just wanting to make sure like we focus on like what racism is, which structurally, like systematically is one of those things that is like about power, right, of groups, and remembering that it's not the same as bias because bias is that unconscious or conscious prejudice, and racial bias is basically determined upon race, right? Things we think or learn, and racism is what happens when that belief translates into action. Sorry, y'all can't see the last line, but does that make sense? Everybody get that part? All right, cool. How about racialization? Because this is real. And it goes a lot along with what we're talking about, and I feel like happens every day. Anyone ever heard this word and what it may mean, or just take a guess? Just like think racism, but it's like a thing that people do to anyone? Stereotyping in a way, yeah, Raymond. But basically stereotyping groups of people, like that groups of people will act this way. Same thing as we just talked about, right? But just assuming that everyone that is a person of color is dangerous, right? And so you just have that thought. So it's about that unconscious bias, but that racial bias, and you really take it a step further and basically put everyone in a group. There's this great YouTube called The Power of a Single Story. Watch it. And it's really amazing, and it just talks about how you can't think everyone has the same experiences no matter if they look alike, and like how important it is to kind of really think about. But I wanted to throw that out there as a concept that's not always talked about. And we just talked about unconscious bias, but I want you to take these questions and just think about them, right? As you look at them, it's not something that you're going to answer, but we are all taught something, right? I can give you an example of being a college student. I used to be a nanny, and I went to Westchester University, if you know where that is. It's in Westchester, PA, a very white, pretty much middle to upper class, all around the university setting, and I would nanny for different families. And so at the current time, I was nannying for a white family, and the kids were 1 and 3. And I never will forget this. Like my 19-year-old self was like in blatant shock because the little girl was trying to erase my skin. And she said that my skin was dirty and she was trying to erase it. And you may think, well, like they hired you to be a nanny, but like what this 3-year-old must have heard or have been taught about people who have brown skin, or how many brown skin people has she been around in her 3 years, of age to be cognizant, maybe one, because, thinking about if you're 3, you don't really know what's going on. But do y'all get it? Like, have you ever been in a situation that you're like, people really don't understand who I am? It's really just about their perceived notion of what people that look like me are. Does that make sense? Because we were all taught something, and really thinking about being gay. And I know me, when I was raised, like I was taught that if you were gay, you were going to hell, right? And that is just what I was taught about being gay, period. Like until I was old enough to be like, wait, like this is me. So what does that mean? And then that internal homophobia took over, and that's a whole different workshop. But it's like what we were taught about different groups of people and how important that is. And so really kind of thinking about the third question, how might your beliefs affect the decisions that you make? Because you all are college students or work for the university in some capacity, but you may have to hire people one day. You may have colleagues that look different than you one day. And so I always kind of challenge people, like, what if your boss looks like somebody that you feel like you are not comfortable with? Then what? Right? Like, how would that work out for you? I think I heard someone say they're just trying to like continually increase, their cultural competency and experience. That's like a forever journey, and so something just to really like dive in and think about. All right, so let's just watch this video. Let me make sure y'all can hear it. Somebody just give me a thumbs up.
Have you or anyone that you know ever had trouble hailing a cab? If your answer is no, then you might have white privilege. Here's how it works.
You only see your child when you look at him.
From the moment a white person is born, they're afforded certain privileges. While the extent and nature of their privilege varies from country to country, one thing's consistent. If you're white, society be like, you out here winning. So what's white privilege? In the words of Peggy McIntosh, a white scholar who started studying white privilege in the 1980s, white privilege is an invisible package of unearned assets that I can count on cashing in each day, but about which I was meant to remain oblivious. In her essay, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, McIntosh even details dozens of examples of white privilege that she experiences in day-to-day life. For example, white folks are able to turn on the television and see someone who looks just like them. She even details things like being able to find Band-Aids that match her skin. And it works in 3 distinct ways. First, white privilege provides white people with perks. Some perks go unnoticed, like being able to actually use complimentary shampoo and conditioner at a hotel. These perks lead to a sense of entitlement because whiteness is the standard. Imagine how white women would react if hotels only carried Shea Moisture. White privilege also creates measurable advantages. A white person is more likely to be approved for loans than black folks, and that's part of what has led to disparities in home ownership. Under 42% of black folks are homeowners compared to 72% of white folks. And what about jobs? With the exception of Asian men, all groups make less than white men when we talk about median hourly earnings. This especially impacts black women. Black women make 62 cents for every dollar that white men make, and we also make 79 cents for every dollar that white women make. Not to mention that white people are able to profit off of industries that have historically penalized black folks. Just look at marijuana. According to the ACLU, the use of weed is pretty much the same among black and white people, yet black folks are nearly 4 times as likely to be arrested for possession. When it comes to banking off of the billion-dollar industry, black folks are shut out. About 1% of dispensary owners in the US are black. Yep, that has white privilege written all over it. And folks, we're only talking about weed here. The fact that there are major disparities in incarceration rates based on race is no surprise. Finally, white privilege has pretty much come to shape everyone's view of history. Everything we've ever learned in schools, every face on our cash money, damn near every page in textbook centers white people and has been written from the white perspective. These are the faces of our nation's heroes. Why does this matter, you say? Well, white privilege literally affects everything.
Income, education, employment, incarceration, spending, housing, and even assembling.
Real talk. Do we think that a Black person can protest while being armed and live to see the next day? These unearned handouts afforded to white folks are completely real, and the effects of white privilege are measurable. In the words of Damon Young, editor-in-chief of Very Smart Brothers, what white privilege means for white people is that their whiteness hasn't been a social, political, professional, financial, or legal hindrance. They have the privilege of the benefit of the doubt, which manifests as the privilege to just be. So now that you know, are we gonna dismantle white privilege or not? Real talk. Real talk.
All right, all right. One of my favorite videos, I love her. It definitely is from a few years ago, but how relevant is it, right? We had our own prime example just this year of white privilege in real life. Like, I don't even know how else to say it. Like, it just was blatant form, right? But let's start with the video. So what about the video shocked you or surprised you, or did you learn anything new from the video that you didn't know?
Can I just say this one thing really quick?
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's kind of funny that she showed like the Shea Moisture thing, because I have the exact same product literally in my bathroom.
Yes, no, I thought it was so funny too. Like, but you don't think, but that's something you don't think about, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I stay in a lot of hotels, and I always pointed out how all the products are like never anything I could ever wash my hair with,
Exactly, yeah.
right? And it's so interesting. But I was like, imagine that, like, but I've never stayed in a Black-owned hotel. I don't know if anyone has, or like any other minority-owned hotel, like wondering if the products are different, which I'm sure they are. Anyway, so funny, Devin. Other thoughts? What from the video stood out to you, like something different?
I never even thought about the Band-Aid thing until I seen this. Like, I was like, wow, that's true.
Yeah, but you know, so now I feel like over the last, I would say like maybe 12 to 18 months, there are new Band-Aid companies have come out with different flesh color Band-Aids. And there's so many things like that. So I feel like this was from a few years ago, of course, but like even just thinking about how many things have had to adjust, because I don't know about y'all, but in terms of hair care or skincare products for people of color, they weren't normally in stores. Do you know that over the last 5 to 10 years, they just were added to stores like CVS and Walgreens, and they used to always be in the multi-ethnic section. They used to be in a special section, and now some stores have like integrated them. But you know, things to think about. Band-Aids for real. Stockings. I don't know if y'all know the history on stockings, like nude stockings only being the color of like fair skin people who wear them, and not really considering dark skinned people. What else? Someone in the chat said, you surprised that, oh yeah, she didn't mention appropriation. She definitely didn't. Yes, Stephanie, also are more expensive. What else? Anything else in the video that like stood out to you all?
I would say the part about marijuana and how the differences between like white people and Black people, with like Black people getting more getting arrested for possession, and like it being okay with like white people having it.
So real, Vanita. Like, I guess I never even thought about the industry either, and like thinking about like how that, well, now it's more like less than 5% of dispensaries are owned by people of color, but like the dispensaries make so much money, y'all. And you know, really kind of thinking about that, but so did slavery, right? And so that brings me like to my next point, how we arrived here, and really thinking about this concept. And a student asked me this. I can remember I was in, where were we at? Last February, Arizona. A student asked me, well, like, where did white privilege even come from? And I was like, whoa, not today. But it's just like so compact, right? And to really just think about it. And we just held our MLK legacy event, and reflecting on some of MLK's speeches, like he talks a lot about it, but really about how like our race became a source of difference, and that we were less than, and that we should be treated less than, right? And that's clearly where it came from, right? And that whether white people who participated in the mistreatment or not, like they still benefit from the advantages, and they always have. And it has always made us less than, and that trauma, displacement, discrimination, all of that like gave birth to white privilege, right? And so it's so much to unpack, but one of my tips I have for folks in general, but of course, especially white people, is to learn about the history of systematic racism. Like learn about where it really came from. We were just in Savannah, Georgia, and every time I go somewhere, I do like a historical tour. And so just learning about like all of the different parts of history down there in Georgia, and you know, watching movies like present day, like the Harriet Tubman movie. I'm not sure how many people watched it, but like really kind of thinking about like what it used to be like. And then once like Black people in general were set free, they really didn't even have anything. They couldn't get jobs, they couldn't go to school, like, so you were set free, but then you weren't given anything to help you. So just think about, you know, kind of like how we got here. And I guess the question is like, why is this still a problem today? Because it is, because we're still treated like less than, and white is still treated like normal. You know, they said Christopher Columbus founded America. Who knows who founded America? Anyone?
The natives.
Yes, thank you. Like the indigenous people, like, but we were all taught Christopher Columbus founded America. Like the, you know, thinking about that. So really kind of getting to the white privilege conversation, you know, I think to start, you have to talk about what it's not, because people are always say like, but I'm not racist. And so reaffirming people that having privilege is not about you being racist, but it's also not about you saying that you didn't have a struggle. It's not about you saying that you didn't have to work hard to get where you are, right? It's not, you know, it's not saying those things. What it says is that no matter how poor you are, right? No matter your gender, if you are white, you get a built-in advantage that comes, right, with the color of your skin. Imagine it, right? And that's all we're literally talking about. And in this world, if you succumb to that and every day you just go about your life and you just like, oh, well, I'm white, I can't do anything about it, then you are using your white privilege to pretty much go about every day. And so just wanting people to kind of like think about the conversation, like when you go into it. And so breaking it down, like we're talking about two words. So one, like calling people white or just focusing on people's whiteness sometimes makes white people uncomfortable because they're not used to it. Do you know some white people don't believe white is a race? Is white a race? Y'all don't know? Yes, whether you want to call it Caucasian or white, it is a race, right? But I think like we get so focused on like races that are not white. So being white is a race, right? And then the word privilege, which we've kind of unpacked, right? Everyone thinks that if you're saying I have privilege, and that means I didn't struggle. Like that's not what we're saying, right? And so let's talk about college students in general. Offices like ODE, you know, the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, one of our goals or our mission is to support our students of color, because what we know is that our students of color don't graduate at rates that our white students do. Does that mean that some white people haven't struggled to graduate college? No, it just means that looking at overall, we see that white people do graduate more than do students of color. Does that make sense? All right, cool. So going back to the question I asked earlier, before I kind of show you my video about like how these conversations should go, how I want to hear some examples about what kind of conversations you have all had about race, and how did they go? Because what I hear from people is that they really don't know how to either approach or confront or have the conversation. So what most people your age are doing is not talking about it at all. So I heard a lot of you say, yes, you have conversations about race. So I want a couple of vulnerable folks to kind of share. You don't have to share like the nitty gritty details, but like, how did it go? What kind of problems do you feel like you had, or was it good, not good? Tell me more. Who wants to start?
I could start.
All right, great. Tell us
So
what
it was around the riots and everything, the protests, and they were saying, my friend was talking about how the riots was all violent and all this stuff, and he just didn't understand. And then we fast forward a couple of months when the Capitol got sieged, and I didn't hear a word like what he said, and I came at him with that same energy he came at me with, and he just didn't have anything to say. He just pled the fifth. It was just funny.
Yeah. What happened at the Capitol was a conversation that goes a lot of different ways for me with people my age, but I want to hear from y'all. So what else? What other types of conversations have you all been having that may be surrounding racial issues, microaggressions, privilege?
For me, I have a friend who is Pakistan, and from Pakistan, sorry. And we was talking about like the word nigga, sorry. And he likes to say it a lot. And I realized one day, I'm like, whoa, you can't say that. And he just didn't understand why he wasn't allowed to say it, because he's like, you see my skin is brown, I'm black too. And I'm like, it's not the same thing, you know what I'm saying? So that conversation, like, I feel like it didn't go anywhere, because I feel like to this day he probably still does it, probably not to my face, if you know what I'm saying. So that's a conversation I had. Did it go anywhere? I hope it impacted him, but I don't think it did.
Yeah, I mean, especially because in the media and in music, it's said by people that also are not Black, you know, as a sign of like power, like, oh, I can say it because I make this much money and I sell albums. And I'm just like, but it's still leading the trend that anyone can use the word, right? And the significance of the word. Thank you for sharing, Patrice. Who else?
Wait, relating to what Patrice said, it was kind of different because there's this person from my high school who he's white, and he grew up in like a bad neighborhood, and he was like raised around like people that use those words all the time. And so he, I guess, felt like it was okay to use it, and you know, because he was like grew up around it. And I was just like, he would say it and I'd just be like, okay, like that's awkward. But then like it was constant. And I was like, okay, you need to stop. And I tried to like explain why and everything, and they're like, oh, but like I think I just saw in the chat, like, I get the pass, or like I grew up around it, like it's hard to not say. And I'm just like, why is it hard to not say? Like, I just don't understand that at all. So that was like super annoying.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's something that goes with your generation, but someone said in the chat that there's an N-word pass that exists where a Black person might be fine with one of their white friends saying it to them, but not other Black people because they don't know them well. Okay, yes, I know what you're saying. So like basically, if you know me, like you could say it, but like not saying it to other Black people. But I feel like that's like telling your kid like, oh, I don't know, like you could do this thing with me, but you can't do it with other people. And the kid is like, well, why you let me do it with you? Like, you know? So for me, I just feel like it needs to be all or nothing, but y'all know that's a whole nother workshop in itself. Julio said about colorism. Yes, we did a whole colorism 101 workshop last semester. Colorism is so real, and it's more real in communities that are not just Black, like in Latinx communities, right? And especially in Asian American communities, like, oh my gosh. So we definitely broke that down. But it is so real. So what do people mean when they say, I don't see color? Have y'all heard someone say that? And like, how does that make you feel? And have you ever like said something back? Because that's a real thing.
I honestly just don't believe in that. Like I don't get what people mean when they say that. Like, I just
so do you know what people mean when they say that?
No, I don't get it.
What's the title of this event?
White privilege.
It means that they have white privilege. That's what they mean when they say that I don't see color. So I want y'all to start calling people on that, right? People will say that all the time, like, I really just don't get this whole racism thing. Like, I don't see color. People are just people. Let's love everyone. And you, my friend, benefit from white privilege. Like, you know, because we don't really have the ability to do that or say that. And so really kind of thinking about that. White privilege is about like being able to step up and not just be complacent in this advantage that has been given to you. Like when you see something that's wrong, say something, and really kind of thinking about it. Yes, colorblind racism, Mildred, exactly. So really kind of thinking about that. So I know for me as a Black woman, I don't have the ability to not think about race every day. I don't know how y'all feel, but I don't have that ability. But white folks just think about race when it's convenient, right? And so what I'm asking white folks to do and traveling the world and presenting, I don't get to do it a lot lately, of course, because I'm back working full time. But these are the real conversations I had. And I did keynotes for 500 to 1,000 white folks, all looking at me, little Black girl from Philly on the stage. And I'll tell you, you know, I tell them straight up, and it's very important to just be trying to transparent. And I've received like really amazing feedback, but some people just aren't ready to hear it, right? But you're complacent. Like you're complacent if you believe what happened at the Capitol was, what do they call it? Freaking a riot or whatever they called it. No, it was terrorism. And, you know, and like, let's call it what it is. And if it was my little self up on somebody's gate, I wouldn't be here to talk about it. And so people don't see that, right? Like, I'm like, let's turn the picture around and see like how that would have went the wrong way. They also, when comparing it to like Black Lives Matter riots, I've heard people say that Black Lives Matter riots are always not peaceful. And I'm like, but what happened at the Capitol was peaceful? Like, you know, I'm just, you know, it's just kind of the and or the if. But I wanted to show this video. I showed it at one of my workshops last semester, but I continue to believe this is the best video to really like reiterate the conversation that sometimes you need to have with people. Because sometimes people say things that are racist and we're not calling them a racist. We're saying the thing you said was racist. Everybody heard what I said, right? And so how many people know someone that says something that was racist, but deep down, you know, they're not really racist, but the thing they said was, right? All right, so let's watch my friend here because he breaks it down.
Race, the final frontier. No matter what channel you watch, no matter what feed you aggregate, it seems like everybody everywhere is talking about race right now. And when everybody everywhere is talking about race, that means sooner or later, you're gonna have to tell somebody that they said something that sounded racist. So you need to be ready and have a plan in place for how to approach the inevitable that sounded racist conversation. And I'm going to tell you how to do that. The most important thing that you've got to do is remember the difference between the what they did conversation and the what they are conversation. Those are two totally different conversations, and you need to make sure that you pick the right one. The what they did conversation focuses strictly on the person's words and actions and explaining why what they did and what they said was unacceptable. This is also known as the that thing you said was racist conversation, and that's the conversation that you want to have. The what they are conversation, on the other hand, takes things one step further and uses what they did and what they said to draw conclusions about what kind of person they are. This is also known as the I think you are a racist conversation. This is the conversation you don't want to have, because that conversation takes us away from the facts of what they did and the speculation about their motives and intentions, and those are things you can only guess at, you can't ever prove, and that makes it way too easy for them to derail your whole argument. And that is the part that's crucial to understand. When you say, I think he's a racist, that's not a bad move because you might be wrong. That's a bad move because you might be right. Because if that dude really is racist, you want to make sure you hold him accountable and don't let him off easy. And even though intuitively it feels like the hardest way to hit him is just run up on him and say, I think your ass is racist, when you handle it that way, you're actually letting him off easy because you're setting up a conversation that's way too simple for him to derail and duck out of. Just think about how this plays out every time a politician or a celebrity gets caught out there. It always starts out as a what they did conversation. But as soon as the celebrity and their defenders get on camera, they start doing judo flips and switching it into a what they are conversation. I have known this person for years, and I know for a fact that they are not a racist, and how dare you claim to know what's inside their soul just because they made one little joke about watermelon tap dancing and going back to Africa. And then you try and explain that we don't need to see inside their soul to know that they shouldn't have said all that mad about the watermelon, and you try to focus on the facts of the situation, but by then it's too late because the what they are conversation is a rhetorical Bermuda Triangle where everything drowns in a sea of empty posturing until somebody just blames it all on hip hop and we forget the whole thing ever happens. Don't let this happen to you. When somebody picks my pocket, I'm not going to be chasing him down so I can figure out whether he feels like he's a thief deep down in his heart. I'm going to be chasing him down so I can get my wallet back. I don't care what he is, but I need to hold him accountable for what he did. And that's how we need to approach these conversations about race. Treat them like they took your wallet and focus on the part that matters, holding each person accountable for the impact of their words and actions. I don't care what you are. I care about what you did.
My friend, he says it the best. Thoughts? Did that make sense to y'all? Have you all been in a situation before? We also call this kind of like intent versus impact, right? So someone steps on your foot and says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Does that change the way your toe is throbbing right now? Exactly. So they didn't intend for it to hurt, but it hurt. This happens in relationships, right? You might not want to admit it, but think about someone that did something to you. You was dating and, you know, they didn't mean it that way, but you can't get over how it made you feel, right? And so really kind of focusing on what people said. Remember, the number one key thing with privilege, white privilege, or racism in general, people don't want the fear of being called racist. So just take that off the table to begin with. Even if the back of your head, you like, yo, this person might be racist. Just take that out of the back of your head, right? Like we're being transparent, right? But just focus on what they said, what they did, and like why it was problematic, right? So for someone that I don't know trying to touch my hair is problematic. This is not a petting zoo, right? I'm not an animal. You shouldn't be trying to touch my hair. It's not appropriate. Who else do you see on the street and you just want to touch their hair, right? Thinking about those things, asking people, where are you really from? Like, where are you really from? You mean, where did my ancestors come from? You know, like, what are you asking me? And so really trying to get people to understand what they're saying and how it's problematic and really focusing on that and not calling them a racist, right? And really thinking about that. So some of the tips for activism, you know, I think is to share with people and for all of us to kind of reflect on, right? The main thing is like, don't let fear be an excuse for your inaction. So complicitness or silence is a reason for so many years, pardon me, as a part of slavery, like white people didn't do anything because it was the way and no one said anything, but it's time for white people to start doing something, stepping up, right? And so really taking it like a step at a time. And I think one of the greatest places to start is by learning and listening. You know, but for the most part, when you do a workshop on white privilege, you don't necessarily get a lot of white people to show up, right? Everybody feel me on that? And so even being at a university and having a workshop, like normally, I don't even put the word privilege in my workshops. Do y'all know that if I'm at a conference and I'm presenting, I never put the word privilege in my workshop? More people show up when you don't. And then when they get there, you're like, guess what we're going to talk about? Privilege. And then they can't leave because they're there and they're stuck, right? But it's been a kind of like, I make it funny, but it's real. And when I first started presenting, I would like name things like the privilege to lead and like no one would show up. But really thinking about that. So some points on here about asking questions and not shying away from challenging conversations. White privilege is, you know, when something happens, you have the ability to go the other way, right? You have the ability to act like it didn't happen, to not address it. But what I challenge white people to do is do address it, do call something out, because the moment a person of color or a woman or undocumented citizen, like the moment that we all call things out, then we look angry or upset, and then people do not hear it the same way they hear it from someone that's white, that's a privilege. Does that make sense? So if you think about like all the different categories, what's the epitome of the most privileged person in the world? They would be white, because that's what we're talking about. What else would they be?
Rich. Rich.
What else?
Straight.
Straight. Thank you. What else?
Male.
Somebody, yes, in the chat she said a man. Absolutely. What you say, Kathy?
Male, I agree.
Male, male, right? Able-bodied. And we want to talk about size. They would be what's called a normal body size, right? All these things that we don't think about, right? And so really considering like what the norm is and like how you're treated if you're not the norm. You know, I feel like I always saw us as being like what we call we talk about being on a margin. What does it mean to be on a margin? That people of color are on a margin, our needs. What does that mean? Just take a guess. Think about the margin. Thank you in the chat. On the outskirts, not recognized, right? And so really, really thinking about that. So like white people's needs have always been met and they're considered the normal, where people of color were always excluded and our needs are like barely considered. We're pretty much hanging on a margin and that's where the gap exists, right? So understanding like where the gap is, like how it exists and like how we kind of move past it. I feel like not move past it or work to bring that gap together, you know, and there are small strides everywhere. Like, yes, you can find a Band-Aid now that goes with my dark skin and the hair products are where they, you know, need to be. But when I go to apply for jobs and my name is not Lisa or Becky, sorry, I apologize if somebody is Lisa or Becky here, but like I'm automatically going to get the job. You know, like my name is Anissa and they definitely know that I'm not white. You know, and if anyone does any research on my name is actually Arabic. So I've actually been asked why I'm not Muslim. Like, are you practicing Islam and different things? But my last name is Smith, so that messes them up. So it's like always been that thing, like having a name that you know that people will be able to pronounce, right? And not having to give yourself a nickname or a letter because every single day here at Penn State, someone spells my name wrong. Every single day, even though it's in my signature and it's a part of my email, like every single day. But I feel like if my name was Lisa or Becky, it wouldn't be spelled wrong, right? And so those are just one of those things, you know, to think about. When you walk into a bank and apply for an account, is someone going to consider that you don't belong here, right? Has anyone ever walked in a place and people look at them like they don't belong here? Harsh, you know, me and you have had this conversation for so long, you know, since I've been here, but I think talking to Harsh has made me like even rethink my privilege just as being Black, right? But, you know, a lot of like my Indian and Muslim counterparts and colleagues like have gotten profiled even worse than me because they think they could be terrorists. Right. And so really thinking about like what that looks like how we show up every single day and in all of these different circumstances. For me, where I live at, right, it's just not a lot of us. So people are like, what is she doing here? Right. Most of the places that I walk into. Raising a 14-year-old who's in a predominantly white school district, you know, like how everything that we're going through in terms of helping to prepare him for high school. But enough of me talking. So you should have about awesome 10 minutes. I wanted you all to kind of just do some reflections in terms of just your own progress, your own experiences. And I wanted like at least to get a few people to kind of reflect on, I don't know, something that they learned today that they want to go out and learn more about. Because remember, this was just like a starting point. This was just like an introduction. But what is it that you're committed to taking away from this session to continue your learning? Because no matter, you know, your race or ethnicity, we all have some learning to do.
For me personally, I would take away to talk and say something when I see something doesn't look right. Because even though I don't have white privilege, I do have privilege over some situations where I can talk and speak out. And like if I see something that doesn't look right, I should talk instead of be like, I guess, comfortable about things that I'm used to and get out that, like that, those stereotypes or biases and anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Patrice. I think asking you all to consider, just because you may be a person of color, there are so many different identity groups that also need help. And you know, they need people to advocate for them. And we can't ask people to be non-complicit about race, but we are complicit about sexual orientation or gender identity or nationality, right? And so really thinking about those things. All right, who else? Something that you can take away and move forward from the session.
For me, I think it should be about understanding each other's point of view. And if we do have those encounters with somebody who is privileged and doesn't really understand what it means to be privileged, rather than attack them, I think we should, quote unquote, kill them with kindness and educate them so they can really understand the point of view.
Yes, absolutely. I love the killing with kindness. And what we need to do is more of that. I see so many, even of my friends, they're like, I don't have time for this. And sometimes it is exhausting to like continue to have the same conversations, but I ask people to kind of muster up, that strength when you can and have those conversations. Because if we all say we don't have time for this, then people aren't getting called on their stuff and they aren't getting educated. Who else? What about some of the people I haven't heard from? You can also drop it in the chat.
Can I ask a question really quick?
Oh, sure.
So, sorry. Okay, so there could be many reasons why someone like stops and stares at you. But like it was a couple days ago, I was like at the store or something, and this older white woman like literally was just like staring me down. And again, it could have been anything, but honestly, like immediately it's like, okay, it's my skin color. Like what else could it be? So like I just don't know like how to, I guess, react to that.
Girl, woo. I feel you. So I'm going to give you a politically correct answer and then an Anissa answer, okay? I'm recording this, right? I gotta know. I'm joking. So Devin, I feel you. So I would say it's because you're beautiful, girl. And she just could not like stop looking at you because you're gorgeous. Boom. Because I had to be like, I look in the mirror like, I must look good today because they keep on staring. And for me, like, okay, I got like blue and red hair. And like, so sometimes I'm like, okay, Anissa, like maybe you're calling a little attention to yourself. That's why people stare. But I don't think you have any like, thing that bring someone to you, except that you're just gorgeous. Honestly, sometimes being a person of color has been equated to not being beautiful. Like, I need y'all to understand this. Like people be like, you're pretty for a Black girl, meaning that Black girls aren't pretty. Tell me more. Right? You're pretty for a lesbian. So what are you saying? You never saw a pretty lesbian before, right? So seriously, sometimes it's just about beauty. And then sometimes it's just about their stuff. Sometimes people used to stare at me because they said I look like somebody. And that was when Dreamgirls was out. Y'all kind of young. I don't know if y'all remember Dreamgirls, but they said I look like Jennifer Hudson. And when Dreamgirls was out, people used to stop me everywhere and ask me if I was Jennifer Hudson. And because I was a waitress at the time, people would be like, just wait a minute, just stay right here. I know you look like someone. And it just would be so dramatic. So maybe you look like someone, or maybe you're just beautiful, but that's my politically correct answer, honestly, is that they just can't get enough of our beauty, girl. But it happens to me all the time.
Oh my God, you kind of do look like her.
It was really bad, y'all. It was horrible. Like, I was just like, people would stop me everywhere, like everywhere they would stop me. And then like, because I wear like all kinds of crazy hair types and colors, you can ask my wife, sometimes she's just like, I'm leaving you, because people will stop me in random like Target and just be like, oh my gosh, I love your hair. And they're like making a big scene about my hair, but I'm just like, white people have been wearing purple and pink hair since the beginning of time. But I guess because mine is like twisted and doing all types of different things. So I have so many hair stories to share, but I want to hear from a couple more people before we wrap up. Thank you, Devin, for sharing that.
Thank you, by the way.
You're so welcome. What else? Anything else you're able to take away from this as you move forward?
How can we further inform, I guess, the opposite race about the privilege that they have, and not somewhere they think that like we think that they're racist or yeah.
Oh, yes. Thanks for that, Vanita. Let me drop this right here for you. I am going to send you all an email because I found so many great resources. But I want to drop, so she mentioned Peggy McIntosh's Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. How many people have heard of that? So my recommendation is, hold on, because I can't type and talk. Anyone else can't type and talk? Like, I'm the worst. Like, if I try to send a text message and talk, it messes up. But Peggy McIntosh studied white privilege like way back, right? So, you know, she started studying it, and what she did was write out this list. And Vanita, I think the best way is to take this list and analyze it, because it gives you those prime examples. And when I start to drop examples on white people, they're like, wow, I never thought about it, because it's so real that some white people don't know how they experience privilege. Let's start there. So you might be flabbergasted, but just get past that piece and then like take this list and do some more research on Peggy McIntosh. So this list has 50 ways in which white privilege is experienced every single day by white people. And so really taking this list and being able to, like, if you have that kind of relationship with the person, like make one of these make sense in their lens, because sometimes you can read something, you can be like, that's not me. Right. So of the 50, like, for example, college students, some of these things, like college students are going to be like, I really don't care. So, you know, so definitely like look at the list and go in there. Julio said, I honestly recommend watching stand-up comedy specials because it shows you the different types of humor and experiences between different types of people. Yes. And on YouTube, there is a whole like different clips of comedians talking about white privilege. It's actually really funny, but I wouldn't show that a program, but it's really funny. But look at this list, Vanita. So that's what I would say. I would pull out those examples that are going to resonate with the people you're trying to talk to. Because like, for example, if you were trying to talk to your family, that might be a different conversation than your students, than your grandparents, I don't know, right? So, and then like trying to explain white privilege to my 14-year-old, y'all, is like, I don't know, like think about when y'all were young. When did y'all start learning about this stuff? Did y'all even learn about it like when y'all were young? Because I know I did. My mom never like sat down and said, there's this thing called privilege, like people have. Like, I don't know. So I learned about racism in a way, and then like learned about different groups of people, but it never was formal. Did anyone like learn about this stuff early on in life? I think it was something I noticed. Okay, good. Something I noticed rather than I learned. Right. Okay. I'm just wondering if it's changed over the generations. Julio, you did?
Not really, but I was gonna say, I remember we used to watch like Roots or something in history class, or learn about slavery, and then like white people would turn around and be like, "I'm so sorry," and I'm like, bro, like I wasn't there. Like, you know
right,
what I mean?
right. And that's the thing, like, and let's end with that. I think that's so real. You know, I feel like racism is not like the thing that I want white people to be sorry for, because you're not the one that had our ancestors like up in the house on, you know, out in the field. But what you have to do is turn that sorriness into like, what does it look like here today? Yeah, slavery doesn't exist, but like white privilege is still alive and in effect. Do y'all know that universities was created for white men? Like universities, they were created for white men. They weren't even created for women or people of color in general. So like all these institutions that we benefit from, and that is a privilege that we all are college educated, right? That, you know, we all get to like take that and do something with it. But it's just kind of like just thinking about that. That also, that link I sent you has all of the different checklists that includes everything from straight to able-bodied to Christian privilege, which I know I have a lot of. So just kind of like really like jump into those things that kind of like make you different, but then kind of things you probably never thought about, if that makes sense. And Devin said that someone else in my high school would have arguments with others about white privilege. Wow. And say, tell me something I got in life that you didn't. And we go to the same school. I don't think he understood much. And my dad is Black, and he mainly spoke about these topics as I was growing up, understanding that we may have struggles in life. Absolutely. I think that's how I remember it. Like my mom saying like, you're going to struggle because, which is why when I came out and I told her I was gay, she was just like, well, why would you want to be gay again? Which is, you know, like you're already Black and you're already a woman, and you know you're going to have these struggles. She didn't want me to have a third struggle, but that's how you know it's really who I am. Like, who wants to pick a life of struggle, right? You know, and so those are one of the things. But I really appreciate you all being here. I do have a 4 o'clock. I've had back-to-backs today. today. But please check out our other programs this semester. I really love spending time with folks on talking. It is recorded. Also, all of our presentations are all uploaded on our YouTube channel. So if you're not following us, please do. Just type in Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and we'll definitely get this one up. But we hope to see you soon at some of our other programs. And if you have any questions or follow up, please send me an email. Don't hesitate. My email address is AUS19. You can find me. And also the office is open if you're ever on campus Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And I'm always here on Mondays, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So if you ever want to come in or you're here. All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, y'all.